we return with another installment of the Commitment Issues podcast. Again, no Woody Womack. I am Rob Cassidy, joined by co-host Nick Krueger. You know, this has become a two-man show now. Woody is missing in action. For the foreseeable future, it will be Nick and Rob hosting the show, which I'm okay with as well. We've both been at our respective conferences media day. You were in Dallas at Big XII. Before that, I was in the wonderful city of Birmingham, Alabama for SEC. And there's no shortage of topics and non-topics and hype and everything else that comes out of the events. I guess we can start in Dallas since it was the most recent. What kind of struck you about this installment of Big 12 Media Day, which is always kind of a wacky thing with dancing mascots and who knows what else? The cheerleaders come to the thing.
Boy, if you've ever seen a more lost group of individuals in one place, it was those mascots and cheerleaders trying to be some kind of relevant there in the middle of those media days. They were really just standing around doing a whole lot of nothing.
For some reason, the Big 12 and the Pac 12 bring the mascots, and I guess the reason the SEC doesn't do it is because they have the insane fans in the lobby that are, wilder than mascots. I mean, they basically are unofficial mascots, so maybe they don't think they need to. But yeah, the Big 12 has always been a little bit nuts.
They, they helped out a little bit. They were moving some furniture around as needed. There was some, pantomiming and mocking slingshots and things like that. Just normal stuff that really just applied to nobody while we were out there. But you know what? It's fun. I'll tell you, it was funny to see the Oklahoma State mascot walking around with that big, huge head and the big cowboy hat and those lifeless big pools of black for eyeballs.
And toting around 6-shooters, right? Texas Tech's mascots lead the. I'll tell you what. There's a certain political party that wouldn't be too happy between the Texas Tech mascot and his guns and the Oklahoma State mascot and his guns. The Big 12 definitely leads the league in the right to bear arms, right? Their mascots really exercising that Second Amendment.
No, and it's no coincidence we had the whole operation in Dallas, in the heart of Texas, too. So
yeah, no doubt about it, man. No doubt about it. All right. Well, moving into maybe something beyond the cheerleaders. Obviously, realignment kind of dominated the talk down there, even though that wasn't intended. It just kind of seems like by happenstance it took over the conference. Was that kind of the feel you got, or what was kind of the prevailing topic from Big 12 Media Day?
Yeah, sort of. Well, obviously the discussion about Baylor kind of right from the start made an imprint on things, even when it wasn't on purpose, because the Commissioner Bob Bowlesby came out and introduced new Baylor head coach Jim Grobe as Al Grobe, and said it several times, and I thought he was I thought I missed Al Groh, former Virginia New York Jets coach, and I was like, wait a second, what team is he coaching now? But no, he was talking about Jim Grobe. But past that misstep, you're right. Yeah, the expansion and the talk of the addition of a true conference championship game starting in 2017, that sort of kind of snowballed in terms of people asking about it more and kind of trying to get coaches' opinions on things, which of course they pretended like they didn't have one because they didn't want to ruffle feathers one way or the other. Talking about Big 12 expansion was something that me and Woody talked a little bit about a couple months ago when it was first brought up, and they were talking about is Cincinnati the team? Is Colorado State the team? Obviously, Woody is interested in UCF's possibility of joining a Power 5 conference, and they're in the mix too. So I for the sake of the Big 12, and there was a little bit of talk about them wanting to, get their own network going too, whether it's, kind of the traditional sense like we've seen with ESPN doing with the ACC and SEC, or something like you and me are more familiar with, like the WWE network, for example, where it's internet streaming. But all of that kind of, all of that sort of plays in together into one big, pot of soup. Should we add a couple more teams? How because they were all the one thing that they were all really, really worried and concerned about is they didn't want to ruin the regular season by playing multiple games for the sake of having a championship game and having that somehow further, ruin what's already kind of a messy, sticky spot that we've seen cause like a Baylor or a TCU to have problems with this college football playoff in the past couple seasons.
Let's touch on it a little bit from a recruiting standpoint, though. Try to keep it recruiting around here as much as we can. What teams I feel like adding UCF, as Woody has suggested in the past, would help that. I mean, that footprint, right? Like you'd want to be able to get into Florida a little bit. So if you can add UCF, and strictly from a recruiting standpoint, I'm not here to worry about television markets and all of that, which obviously play in. Money is the biggest factor. But if we're speaking strictly from a Rivals.com recruiting sense, you would think that adding a Houston would be not in anybody's best interest, considering everybody in that conference is already recruiting Texas. The last thing anybody wants, especially the Texas schools, would be to split that pie of Texas recruits even more. And, Texas's president comes out on Twitter today and suggests that he supports Houston. I myself and a few other people believe that he did that just so it was a Pontius Pilate move. He washes his hands of the situation. So if they don't get the votes to get in, he still politically has put himself in a position to say, hey, look, we pushed for you. You just didn't get the votes. I don't think that Texas wants Houston in the Big 12. I don't think that serves them. I don't think it serves anybody. I think that going outside of the state of Texas and getting a new television market and other recruiting ground would serve them a little bit better.
If you want to talk about television markets, though, I mean, Houston is top 3 in the country or something like that. I mean, that's...
Yeah, but don't they already but by having Texas and Texas A&M, they already have a nice share of that Houston market. So I don't think it brings you a new television market. It might bring you a few new fans, but fan base, I bet they're...
But from the perspective of a network situation, obviously Texas A&M belongs to the SEC. So
sure.
You're not making anything on them. If anything, you'd kind of want to. That sort of helps the case for Houston in that scenario, kind of cutting into that. And Houston's obviously pumping a ton of money into their facility upgrades and their stadium upgrades. I mean, they're really on overdrive there. And part of that is probably, the effort to keep Tom Herman in the fold as well.
Do you think Texas leadership actually wants Houston in the Big 12, or is that some posturing?
I've said it before. I would think that Texas and Oklahoma both probably feel like they're immune to whatever changes sort of fall into place after expansion happens. If it were to happen, that's something I asked Bob Stoops during his breakout sessions after his conference. I said, do you? And he thought I was challenging him, of course, in typical Bob Stoops fashion, which of course I had no interest in doing whatsoever. But I asked him if he would be in favor of expansion, being that it's somewhat of a top-heavy conference, especially in terms of wins and losses for Oklahoma. Why would you want to divide things up or add extra elements when you've already got a very good situation for yourself? And he said, hey, whether there's 12, he basically said if there's 12 teams, 16 teams, 10 teams, 8 teams, it doesn't affect me. I'm doing, and you wouldn't expect him to say anything different, but he obviously maintained an air of confidence, regardless of, what gets added to the equation there. And I would think Texas probably feels the same way. Assuming that they're happy with the direction of their football program in house too, So
boy, maybe we'll end on this. The Big 12, boy, if they do anything well, it's flip flopping, right? It's every other year. We're going to expand. We're not going to expand. We're going to expand. Well, maybe we're going to expand. Okay, we're going to expand. I don't know why they can't figure this out. I mean, everything's so reactive, like with them. And it's always been that way, and that's kind of what's got them in the situation that they're in. Is they've sat around and reacted to everything instead of being proactive, while other teams were poaching the Missouri and the A&Ms and the Colorados and the Nebraskas of the world. They should have been out raiding other conferences, but now it's too late. They've gotten labeled as kind of the bottom feeder of the Power 5 conferences, and now they're the ones having to bring these other mid-major types up in expansion because they're not going to be able to poach from another power conference anymore.
We will see. It's obviously an ongoing discussion and a unfolding situation here. So
yeah, no kidding. Meanwhile, the biggest issue at SEC Media Day are coaches still crying about satellite camps, which, boy, we can't get enough of those things, right? And, I kind of brought it up because I wrote some things about satellite camps from there. I think my take on the whole situation from there was nobody likes these things, but yet they're continuing to do them because now they feel like if they don't, people are going to think they're not trying hard enough to recruit. But it's all a big facade because they'll tell you we're not really using these things to discover talent. Kentucky, Mark Stoops was so blatant about it. I really appreciated how, forthright he was when I asked him about, I asked him straight up, did you get anything out of the satellite camps you guys hosted? And he just said no. He made it seem like it was a waste of everybody's time, that they would rather have the kids on campus. And the only reason they did them is because everybody else was doing them and that they felt like they needed to for whatever reason. It's really quite a situation where everybody is just begrudgingly doing these things. Even Brett Bielema, who says they're going to expand to do more, said, they're a giant pain and he doesn't necessarily like doing them, but he feels like they has to. So Jim Harbaugh has really ruined everybody's lives. The media don't like covering these things. I think maybe people in the SEC don't like them. I'm sure. I mean, they benefit the Michigans of the world and, the Nebraskas of the world are people that maybe aren't in as fertile recruiting grounds as some of these Southeastern teams. But boy, reporters, coaches, everybody's miserable. Nobody likes these things.
Well, I know, here in Texas, I went to one that was run in part with Oklahoma State and Arizona State. The coaches there seem to be into it. But the implications of these camps has been well discussed on this show and others. It wasn't talked about too definitively at the Big 12 media days, although Cliff Kingsbury did have maybe the most concrete hardline quote of the press conferences about the satellite camps. And they are relevant to him because being out in Lubbock, you're separated from the rest of Texas. You have to work a little bit harder. It's an upcoming program with a young coach. There's a lot to like about what's going on in Texas Tech, but he said getting the brand out to Austin, getting it to Dallas, getting it to Houston, these satellite camps are sort of a necessary evil. But he said flat out in no uncertain terms, having 800 kids there for a couple hours doesn't help him at all because they can't make heads or tails of it. Even them as the staff that's out there. So, I suppose, given that specific case study right there that I just laid out, if you're doing it for a PR perspective, simple branding with the kids, just to say, if you show up with like a cool T-shirt and you give them a T-shirt at the camp, and it's just and you look at it strictly as a marketing campaign for yourself, and for a school like Texas Tech or an Oklahoma State that's trying to build a little bit more of a reputation amongst these kids that in an area that's dominated by the Texases and the Oklahomas and the A&Ms, that definitely works in their favor. If you're already at the top of the scrap heap, it's no wonder Nick Saban couldn't care less about him,
Even though they're doing them too. Saban himself hasn't been to one, but his staff is sure going to these things, these conjunction camps with other schools. Anyway, the approval rating of these things is, right alongside that of a root canal. So that's about what I got out of it. And the other really big topic of SEC Media Day was, everybody lobbing their best questions at Hugh Freeze about the possible recruiting violations and the NCAA investigation. And, I thought he handled it incredibly well.
Yeah.
He was as forthright. Yeah, he really did. He was as forthright as you can expect. And I'll say this for you. I don't know if he intentionally broke recruiting rules. I don't much care if he intentionally broke recruiting rules. It does not bother me either way. I just assume everybody's cheating and, some people are just better at getting away with it. But he convinced me that he at least talked like a guy that doesn't think he's done anything wrong. So he's either a very, very, very good liar, or he really doesn't believe or know that he's done much wrong. Surely some things happened under his watch, and I think everybody's kind of conceded to that at this point. But I don't think he did not have the demeanor of a man that intentionally broke rules. Whether he did or not, I don't know. But he did a very good job of convincing me that possibly he did not.
That's so interesting that you say that because, sort of on a different level and a different level of severity and the circumstances when Jim Grobe came out and gave his press conference, he answered probably fewer questions than everybody else, any other coach that came up and took that stage, because he talked slow and he talked deliberately and he sounded good and he sounded confident. The words that he said, depending on, which quote you pull out, sometimes the media got after. One thing that they really came down on him is he said, he just said flat out, there's not a culture of bad behavior at Baylor, which he just got murdered for. But honestly, I think from his perspective, because that came on the heels of him talking about his relationship with a coach that had been Coach TF, Grant TF, I think is the guy's name he was coaching.
Boy, but that comes out like right before Oakman gets charged with rape. Like, you want to talk about?
But from Grubb's perspective, he was talking about. I think that he was talking about there was not a culture of bad behavior at Baylor going back to the start of the institution. That doesn't count. That's not what you're here for. That's not what you got hired. But from his tone and his demeanor and the way that he kept his chin up and didn't shy away from the questions. I mean, whatever his level of culpability is going forward, or whatever they told him to say, or however he feels about things, he definitely put on the face that you would want, your figurehead to put on in front of the public like that. So,
boy, the other side of this, and I like Dan Mullen as much as anybody. He's been on this show before. I think he's a really great guy. I don't think that he's intentionally done anything wrong, but he did not do well addressing the Jeffrey Simmons domestic violence stuff. He did a little bit of a good job of isolating himself from it by saying, hey, only suspending this guy for a game was a university decision. I didn't make the call, which is fine. But he's got to come off this is a family and we don't want to kick somebody out of the family. You know, we believe that kind of came off as trite, I think, and a little bit fake. But, you know, at the same time, you can only, I mean, he did wash his hands of it. It was interesting to watch him kind of pass the blame. And I mean, obviously it might not have been his decision. The way he put it, this came from above him. But, you know, he didn't do his approval ratings were also not great. He got murdered in the press. He was going to anyway for that suspension. And, you know, I just don't think he handled it incredibly well. Somebody asked him what would happen if it was his wife or daughter, which was an aggressive question, but, you know, a fair enough question to be asked, I guess. I don't really recall his response. I think he said it never would be, which is a weird response to that. But yeah, that was the other prevailing issue from SEC Media Day.
You know, sometimes these coaches are so good. Going back to what we were talking about with expansion and the coaches saying, you know, my opinion doesn't matter if I had one, and just kind of sidestepping things wherever they can. Sometimes you kind of, I mean, I don't, whatever reporter asked Dan Mullen that, you know, I mean, sometimes if you're really trying to get to the heart of the, you know, the issue at hand, and you have to come across as being a little uncomfortable with your question, you know, I suppose that's the strategy to take. And if he continues to sidestep it and further makes himself look bad because of it, you know, that's the choice that he makes. But I mean, in the court of public opinion, I mean, it's certainly no secret what your what your stance is on the matter. I don't think, but it shouldn't. You know, it's not unjust, right? And it's not one that, and it's one that a lot of people share too. So, you know, it's really interesting, and it's tough for these coaches that shouldn't be asked to have to handle situations like this, because really they're just there to do one thing, and that's win football games.
Yeah, but this is where I get frustrated though, because you can't have it both ways. And I agree with you; they are there to win football games, but, and this is a big but, let's spare the speeches that they give. That, you know how coaches are; they love to advertise themselves as leader of men and molder of young minds. And you and I and anybody else with half a brain knows that's BS. They just want to win football games no matter what. So you can't build yourself up with this, like, I'm here for the kids bravado, and then when something gets hard and it's time to, you know, actually do that, hide behind, you know, I'm just here to win games. Right. You can't have it both ways. And coaches love that stuff, man. They love to talk about how, you know, I just want to make an impact on kids' lives, but only when it's convenient, right? I mean, it's not right. It's not something they're always doing.
You know, here's what I know. I've seen a few pictures recently of you know, coaches hosting pool parties at their house with the kids, and you know, on that are already on the football team, which I'm assuming is allowed team procedure in the NCAA rulebook.
Yeah, it is. That's something that's happened. Have you seen a picture of Bill Snyder in a Speedo by any chance? If you're looking,
no, I haven't seen that, and I wasn't looking for one either. So
okay. I just wondered. I would like to know what the Bill Snyder pool party is like.
But you know, hey, listen, just if we can have more pool parties at coaches' houses and keep the kids out of trouble, then we really are, you know, hitting on all the things that we claim to be as football coaches and leaders of men, right? You know?
Yeah, that's the key to molding young men, is more pool parties.
I like Bill Snyder. He's another guy that did a pretty nice job too. But I just know he's a favorite of yours, so I was real interested to see why you liked the bet. Here's
the thing with Bill, and I spent a very long time covering Bill. I think Bill is a phenomenal head football coach. I think Bill is a nice guy. I get along with Bill. You know, when I see him out in Manhattan, or I used to run into him at restaurants, you know, he was always very good, and, you know, we'd laugh, and he'd ask about my life, and a really good guy by all stretch of the imagination. Bill is impossible to work with. If you are a reporter trying to do your job, Bill intentionally makes it very, very hard for you to do your job. It's, you know, doesn't talk about injuries. He closes practice. He threatens his assistants if they talk to the media off the record. So that place is locked up. It is not an easy place for a reporter whatsoever, and that creates some friction, I think, and it always has. It's been a little bit better in his second go-about than reportedly it was in his first. I was not old enough to be covering him when he was there the first time, but I guess he's gotten a little bit more lax. I was very shocked that he's on Twitter now. That's an interesting development I never thought I would see.
Has he been a good follow?
Uh-huh. Yeah, sometimes, but unintentionally. It's funny in the way like your oldest uncle is funny, where like he had about a couple weeks ago where he tried to post a picture and only the thumbnail came up. You know how you have to like and he thought that it had cropped his family out of the picture and it was only showing the sky. And like there was a series of tweets, and one of the last ones when he couldn't figure out was, "I'll go get somebody to help me." It was amazing, man. It was maybe the best series of tweets I've seen from a football coach.
Oh, wow, boy. And and time is so important to these football coaches. We cannot lose a minute. So to be sitting there struggling with Twitter like that over a family picture must have killed him.
And you just wanted to be like, Bill, all you have to do is click the tweet and it'll expand. It's not Whitney Snyder, your daughter, has not disappeared from the photo. She's in there, I promise. Boy, he can still coach though. I'll tell you what. I mean, that guy's done some pretty amazing things. I don't want to minimalize Bill Snyder and just make him some like babbling old man, because he's not, because he's a very good football coach. But it is very, very funny to watch him try to interact with technology. He once told me that him and Mac Brown Skype together from time to time, which is just an amazing mental image too. Those two talking to each other through cameras on their laptops.
Well, I mean, if the people listening to this podcast right now heard half of the conference calls that we have when all the analysts get together, I mean, I can't imagine that it would be too much worse than when Adam Gorney's computer is echoing constantly and some other people.
Oh yeah, I mean, there are definitely some people that are not old enough to be so clueless about technology on this national staff that, boy, it's like they might as well be 60 when they're really like 38 or however old some of these guys are.
Man, okay. So we're really throwing some people under the bus, and going back, just to wrap that section of the show up, is there any final thoughts that you might have had about Hugh Freeze, considering all the, things swirling around him at the time?
Yeah, I wonder how it's going to. We can talk about this a little bit. I've wondered how it's going to affect recruiting. If this drags on, like I know how it'll affect it if they get a bowl ban. That's not really a question. That will hurt. I know how it will affect it if the decision comes out and nothing really happens and it's a slap on the wrist and maybe they lose a couple scholarships. Mm-hmm. What I don't know is what if this drags out for another 3 months and there's no resolution? Like that might be the worst thing that could happen outside of a bowl ban, right? Is I'll have this uncertainty where you don't really know what the penalty is. And still trying to recruit kids there that are going to ask those hard questions. And there's no way Hugh Freeze, with any kind of straight face, can tell them, oh, it's going to be fine, because he doesn't know. I mean, even if he didn't break rules, which I don't think that he thinks that he did, boosters and assistants and everything else, I mean, he doesn't know what happened yet. I mean, he's got the notice of allegations, but he doesn't know what's going to be proven and what's not going to be proven. It's going to be real tough to sell that program if something doesn't come down soon.
Well, that's exactly, and that's exactly the same problem that I think Jim Grove has at Baylor. And fortunately for me, did you ask any questions in the town hall, like the
yeah. I talked to Butch Jones a little bit, and
did you get on the mic and
yeah.
Oh
yeah,
you
but
did?
not to Hugh. He was getting peppered too bad, and I didn't. It wasn't my spot. I let the beat reporters get to Hugh, but some of the other guys, yeah.
Well, I got the last question asked of Jim Grove came from yours truly, and I asked him just that question, essentially like, listen, you had to let go a certain number of guys out of the 2016 class that had signed letters of intent. You obviously have lost all but one of your 2017 commits to this point right now. They just had a Friday Night Lights event where they offered a couple of kids, and from my experience, there's been a lot of kids sort of playing the wait and see game with Baylor, but that's something that the staff is playing too. They don't know what the final resolution is going to be, with whatever implications are going to come along with that. Whether it's from the NCAA, the Big 12, the school itself, again, self-imposing more penalties. None of that stuff is known yet and won't be. And I think when you're talking about scholarship reductions, he said that they plan to fill a class of 25 this year, which is understandable because by the time they get everything sorted out, they wouldn't be able to levy a penalty until the following season, probably, and that's maybe similar to what's going to happen with Ole Miss. But how do you ask it? How do you ask a kid that is halfway as knowledgeable about the situation? Sure, come along this year. The first year that you're there, probably going to be okay. But then for the next 2 to 3, who knows?
Yeah, and I've always said this, and it's true. Perception is everything in recruiting. Whether you are or you're not, it doesn't matter. It's what you're perceived to be. And if you're perceived to be unstable or it's perceived to be uncertain times, then it is uncertain times, whether it is or not. I mean, that perception is what drives recruits, I think. And that's in going back to what we were just talking about with Bill Snyder. I was talking to a prospect that was considering Kansas State today, actually, at Florida State's camp. And he said the reason that he's not going to pick Kansas State is because, he can't consider them because it's uncertain who the head coach is going to be. Bill's age is really used against him in recruiting, and they're perceived as an uncertain place right now because there is an old head coach, for different reasons, obviously. Ole Miss and Baylor are perceived as uncertain places right now. And until there's a resolution, it's going to be tough.
Yeah. So we'll just have to wait and see. There's definitely another couple of dozen of podcasts coming up in the future based on what's going to end up happening with Ole Miss and Baylor to come, I'm sure. So,
yeah, no doubt about it. All right, well, should we move into everybody's favorite segment of the show, which is Rants and Recommendations, which unless you have something else you want to touch on from Big 10 Media Day or beyond, or Big 12 Media Day or beyond, or we want to talk about more coaches in swimsuits.
Did you say you wanted to bring up something about Tennessee?
Yeah, but I mean, I think that it's pretty well. I mean, I wrote a very long story about it, and everybody else has written.
Plug your story. Let's see.
Basically, yeah, I asked some Tennessee players and Butch Jones about kind of the turning point of this season. You can find it on the website. I posted it over on VolQuest. They do a great job over there. The guys that cover the team day to day. It is, and the way that they've recruited and the way they finished last year has turned this into the beginning of an era that's going to define Butch Jones at Tennessee. They have their picked to win their division in the SEC by the media, and there will be consequences for underperforming. I think he's not going to get fired. This isn't the end of the line, no matter what. But I think that this is going to show which way that trajectory is going to go. This is either going to, after the season is over, this is going to be perceived as a team that's returning to relevance, or it's going to be perceived as a team that is underachieving despite recruiting at a very high level. I think public opinion is going to shift dramatically one way or the next because of this year. And once public opinion starts to shift on you, it's hard to battle the tide.
Yeah, especially in a place like Tennessee, right? As we all know.
as our friend Woody Womack knows, it is.
Yeah.
Woody Womack is perceived to be the devil on the Tennessee in some Tennessee circles. In which case, that does make him the devil in some Tennessee circles.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I guess maybe the other thing too, that not something that I have any sort of supporting anecdotes to. I was really I don't know if impressed is the right word. I was really interested just listening to TCU coach Gary Patterson talk, and just listening to him talk about the program and the direction of it, and what his expectations are for the team in the upcoming season. And there was a lot of chatter about what his feelings were towards Baylor and sort of his response to what was being asked about it. But I think coming into this season, Coach Patterson really, if you want to talk about it, maybe not quite the same sort of thing that Butch Jones is dealing with, but I mean, now with Baylor out of the picture, if you're TCU and Texas still has something to prove this year with a lot of coaching turnover, if TCU can topple Oklahoma this year, and they have as good a chance as any to represent the conference for whatever form that may take at the end of the season. But I think he knows that, and he's excited about it. And I was just really, I really enjoyed listening to him.
He's engaging for sure. He's a funny guy too. I've dealt with him a couple times. He's enjoyable to work with for sure.
Okay.
All right. Well, you have a recommendation or a rant this week. Do you have both? We'll let you go first.
I don't have a serious, meaningful rant. I will say that I do have a fantastic recommendation, though, and I don't know if this is going to end up specifically applying to people that live in Texas, like myself right now. But as you know, you're familiar with Buc-ee's gas stations, correct?
I am. I am.
We love boy, oh boy, since I stepped foot onto one of those things, it's been love at first sight. And, my trips between here in Houston and here in Dallas, I know the Buc-ee's that I'm going to stop out in Temple and Bastrop, and I always make a point to do so. I find something that I need to get, but lately, and I have a pack sitting right here, you can hear it on the mic, and boy, oh boy, I found something called Hanamax Baking Crunchy Cookie Chips. and they come in a variety of flavors, and I've never seen them sold anywhere else except Buc-ee's.
Wait, that's the best name they could come up with these things. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. Say that one more time.
Well, okay, no, they're just called Crunchy Cookie Chips, but which I guess you're right. There's not a spectacular name at all, but it gets straight to the point.
I mean, I guess you know what you're getting.
But it's
except no, I don't. I just thought about that. I don't have any idea what those possibly look like.
All right, so this is them, right? So they're basically they're all the flavor and enjoyability, sweetness and crunch and texture of a cookie, just in a thinner, crunchier form, and they're delicious. The pack that I have sitting in front of me right now is cinnamon sugar. It's doused in cinnamon sugar on top. I mean, it is
what you're describing is stale cookie chips. Like
they're not stale. They're definitely crunchy, crispy. And I'm definitely by nature a soft baked guy, but these things have in the form that they are, it just works for me. The chocolate chip ones are delicious. The salted peanut butter ones are probably my least favorite. Not bad, but just by comparison to the other ones, boy oh boy, I can't speak highly enough of these things, and I'm anxious to see if my endorsement of Hannah Max Baking just propels them to the stratosphere and they come out with new things for me to enjoy, new confections. If you go to Buc-ee's, go pick up some cookie chips and think of me.
I was gonna say, so Nick's recommendation is burnt cookie crumbs. This is what it sounds like, and that's fine. I said I had a recommendation. I can get to that. It's real short and outdated, and maybe we'll skip it. But I do have a little bit of a rant that you reminded me of, and okay. I noted this in my takeaways, my column from SEC Media Day. Greg Sankey, bless him, but so he gives this opening speech where he's talking about all these players and, how some of them have done these mission trips and saved lives. And, one guy from some school works for Habitat for Humanity and has helped build all these houses that host these homeless people. And somebody else's great uncle, escaped Israel during a revolution and yada, yada, and all these like great things. And in the middle of this, he points out in the same breath as builds homes for Habitat for Humanity and goes on mission trips, decides to throw in there that Myles Garrett has deleted his social media accounts. I see. I know. I don't. This narrative that not having a Twitter makes you like somehow virtuous or like a good person, or I don't know when we decided to correlate these two things, and it's probably stems from old people thinking millennials are narcissistic or whatever. So, and Twitter is evil because it stands for narcissism, and if you don't have one, then that makes you a good person. But it's not true. Like it's just I can't imagine that it's the laziest narrative. And these writers and these old people that perpetuate it, there are plenty of really good people on Twitter and probably plenty of really bad people that aren't on Twitter, and the two things are not related. And to try to even push this thing insults my intelligence. When he said that, I like audibly laughed. I couldn't. Boy, you want to talk? He's not the only one. This isn't a Greg Sankey narrative. Like this is an old person narrative. Really, is what it feels like. Is you never hear anybody under the age of 50 pushing that one.
Well, here's the deal, right? So, as a personality on Twitter, you depending on just your overall level of popularity, you'll be considered a good person. Varying level of good person. It's not as easy to come across as being a great, good, virtuous person, as you pointed out on Twitter, but it's really easy to look like a complete idiot on Twitter very quickly and get yourself into trouble in a hurry. So, even though it's not building houses for, the less fortunate, it's definitely, and I don't know Myles Garrett, obviously, I saw him, we saw him at the Under Armour game. I think the year that he played in it, that was the extent of my dealing with him. I have no idea
my issue isn't with Myles Garrett. I'm sure Myles Garrett is a very good person, but it's not because he doesn't have a social media account. Like that has nothing to do with, it's just, so, I mean, I could be a mass murderer, and if I don't have a social media account, that makes me okay? Or like, I don't, yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Well, it depends on if you're verified or not.
I suppose
which you are. True. So,
yeah. Duh. Come on, I'm not some kind of loser peon like the listeners to this podcast.
Or a co-host that's on the mic right now that is not verified.
Wait, you're not. Oh man, you are a loser peon. You probably fly Southwest too.
I got news for you. They said change the Twitter handle and we'll think about it. And I said, are you kidding me? This is part of my identity at this point right now.
See,
It's
that's
printed on my
that's what the
business
kids call
cards.
that's what the kids call keeping it 100 right there, Krueger.
That's right. I kept it 100 all over that conversation to myself.
Well, all right, man. I guess that does it for us. A big thanks to M. Deuce, whose music you are listening to right now. A big shout to Woody Womack, who may or may
He's
not.
he's grinding right now in Louisiana. We'll give him a pass. I know I verified he's dropped the pin. He's in Louisiana. We know he's alive doing something.
Man, he had a real bout with a migraine last night. He was telling me he was throwing up in a bathtub. So we like to tease Woody when he's not on the show, but I think he's got a pretty good excuse this time because boy, being deathly sick in Baton Rouge sounds like just about the worst time I can imagine.
Man, and our voices wouldn't help a migraine whatsoever. I can tell you that.
Absolutely.
All right, Rob. Well,
all right. Next week, tune in for more Coaches in Swimsuits.